in your community. This is the only rental property in town that'll work for our nonprofit. There's nothing else built. But you got to keep it at arm's length, no inside dealing, and you've got to be willing and ready to disclose and divulge that. And again, the IRS wants to know. And if you don't have any conflict policies, I would encourage you to get some. You don't have to be overly creative. There are some that are available through the Internal Revenue Service even. But consider adopting them because, again, that's just a landmine that's waiting to go off, but you can easily avoid it. Another landmine that we run into is in regards to management, employees. Employees are our most important asset. They're our face to our nonprofit. They're the ones out there making it happen, making the deal, shaking hands. Okay. Our problems in management run into three key areas: hiring, communication, and termination. At the very outset, if you've got a nonprofit, irrespective of size, you should have job descriptions for whatever jobs that you're going to hire an employee into. It's so easy to say for a small nonprofit, that's okay, we'll get it figured out after we get them in. We'll figure out the role. No. Spend some time putting together that job description. What are their key functions? What are their ancillary functions? Who do they respond to? How do they report? In this day and age, please do not operate and move forward without a job description for any position you may have. Next, in regards to communication. I've been to numerous board meetings where it's incredibly one-sided as far as communication goes. I am hearing everything, but I'm not participating in it as a board member. The executive director is telling me everything. Okay. Communication should be a two-way street. You as a board member should be talking to the management, and management should be talking to you. If there are problems, the executive director, as easy as it is to say there's never a rainy day, every day is sunny here in South Dakota. That's not the case. You need to poke them as board members to tell you essentially everything. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And vice versa. Executive directors should be willing to talk, because when we have no communication, when we have faulty communication, it's hard to react. Or by the time we finally figure out, all of the chips have been set, and we have a way of getting you beyond that landmine. And finally, as far as termination goes, I could spend an entire day talking about termination. In South Dakota, while we have at-will employment, I would encourage you, if you've got personnel manuals, to again get comfortable with those personnel manuals. In those personnel manuals, really shouldn't say that this is a binding contract. You as an employee are here for a term, and these are the only ways to get rid of you. Work with your local counsel, work with your attorneys. If you've got an attorney on the board, whatever have you. But again, just be very cautious, because termination can also ruin a nonprofit very quickly. The bad will that can happen in a lousy termination is just, that's one danger. The other danger is they turn around and they sue you for wrongful termination, harassment, or any other grounds. And boom, your name's in the paper in stories that you didn't want. And you spent a lot of time working up your mission. You spent a lot of time as far as your charitable purpose. I sure hate to see that blow up. Now, as much as we'd like to believe that our nonprofit will go on forever, there are numerous stories of nonprofits that just don't exist anymore. Whether it's because some of the members have passed away, or whether it's because we don't have the money anymore, or we've sold our assets, or whatever have you. Unwinding and closing shop can be very, very, very difficult. I want to tell you a story here. And I'll begin first by saying this. It always marvels me as to the difference between how some of our generations dress when they go to certain events. Okay. When I have a 20-year-old come into my office, they're probably going to be wearing pajama pants, and they may have combed their hair, they may have brushed their teeth. I'm not sure. I try not to get that close. But it's always interesting when a 20-year-old comes in. But it's equally interesting when the octogenarian comes in, when the 80-year-old comes in. Because I had this one the other day, and we'll call her Rose, marvelous lady. But coming into a lawyer's office, for her, was a real point of pride. She got all cleaned up. She put on her nicest outfit. She did her hair up. She did her makeup on. She looked fantastic. Just coming in to meet with me, I'm just like, wow, I'm very impressed. Rose came into my office though to tell me this story. And I want to share it with you because it goes right to the heart of nonprofits when they go out of business. Rose and her husband had moved to South Dakota back in the 1970s. They located in rural South Dakota. And they fell in love with an old country church. They absolutely fell in love with it. They loved the architecture. They loved everything about it. And right next to the old country church was a little cemetery. And when I mean they fell in love, they literally painted the place on an annual basis, all the way up to the steeple. Their kids were baptized at this church. Their kids' weddings were at this church. If there was a problem with the toilet in the basement, he went over and fixed it. If there were flowers, if there were weeds to be weeded out of the flower box, she took care of it. It was literally their second child. And he eventually passed away here in the early part of 2013. And she's obviously getting up there too. She's an octogenarian. But the church was still very meaningful, very important to her. But she couldn't take part in the governance of this nonprofit. It was created as a nonprofit. She couldn't take part in it anymore. She handed over her book. She'd been serving as the treasurer, the secretary, and the vice president, and the president since the 1970s. Her notes were all handwritten cursive, just beautiful Cyrillic. And she handed it off. In 2015, the beginning of 2015, she got a letter from the new president, the new secretary, the new treasurer, and the new board, saying they were closing up the church. They were selling the pews. They were selling all of the religious artifacts, everything. Her jaw just dropped. It was literally like they were giving up her child, sending her child away. And that was it. She called them up. Why? What's going on? What can we do? Nada. No form of communication at all. Literally falling to pieces, this woman was. Now, she put a lot of her time, a lot of her effort into it. Invariably, when I finally got a chance to look at the finances, I understood the decision made by the board. I knew that it wasn't sustainable. But gang, if you've got a nonprofit, you're in dire straits, or you're thinking about closing up shop, think about your stakeholders, okay? Those people who are relying upon you, or who had relied upon you, or who believed in you. Communicate with them. Let them know. Be transparent. Even if it's the worst case, I'm going out of business. At the end of the day, you still want people to be able to look back fondly and say, I remember that nonprofit. What a great nonprofit. Now, we didn't turn this into any litigation. And there are plenty of cases out there that involve litigation of wrapping up nonprofits. But just be mindful. Communicate. Even if you're merging, communicate. How can you transfer these assets? I know there was a merger a handful of years ago out on the West River involving Banner. Be mindful of your assets. Be mindful of your landmines. Be mindful of your mission. Now, I was very pleased a little while ago to have you do an exercise as far as explaining your mission, because I do find that even when I worked in the nonprofit sector, it's so easy for us to forget our mission. We get focused on all these other things. But while I've stood up here and talked to you for a while in regards to the landmines that you could possibly have, and I didn't get into any specifics that you may have, and we certainly could talk about your landmines later on, I would ask you to take a moment, because I know all of you have a pen, and I believe all of you have paper in front of you. For those of you, for all of you, take a moment or two to write down some of the landmines that you believe that your nonprofit faces. And maybe, hopefully we'll have time at the end of our presentations today to come back and maybe discuss some of those landmines. Don't lose sight of the landmines. They're awful, terrible surprises. But gang, we can navigate around them. We certainly can. If we continue to stay focused on our mission, why are we here, who do we serve, and how do we serve? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Paul. Just as a reminder, before we go head into the break, I want to just reiterate a couple of things with delayed arrivals and point out that we are videotaping this CLE presentation, and we'll be making it available on the State Bar's website, www.sdbar.org, along with the written materials that you have, so that if you have board directors, other staff, in-service training, education of directors, you can plumb the materials that we have made available in our written materials and go to the website and pull off relevant parts of speakers' presentations to supplement what you do in-house. So if you've got cohorts that weren't able to make it, please feel free to utilize the information that we have on our website and the videotape of this presentation. I want to again remind you of the reception that will follow the conclusion of our panel discussion. It'll be in the Maple Room down by the restaurant, in the room behind the fireplace in the restaurant. I also want to call to your attention the materials that we have at the front desk, so that during your break, if you've got an opportunity and have a desire, you can pick up a membership application for the South Dakota Plan Giving Council, which is a chapter of the Partnership for Philanthropic Planning. That membership is open to each and every one of you that are here. It's a multidisciplinary organization that distinguishes itself from the other organizations that you perhaps belong to with your profession, Fundraising Executives Organization, CPA Society, or the State Bar of South Dakota as examples. The opportunity to come together in a multidisciplinary fashion through this organization can't be understated because of the different takeaways that we each have, the different stakeholders that we each have for our nonprofit organizations. Paul and Bobby did a great job of introducing the Act and telling you about some of the whys we should be attentive to what's contained in the new Act. We're going to come back this afternoon or after this break with Alex and Andrew. We're going to talk more about some other things that are relevant to our new Act and drill into the how, on how we can sidestep some of these landmines, protect our volunteer directors and officers as well as our staff, and avoid the types of things that were presented to you earlier this presentation. We're going to take a break and convene here at 3 o'clock. The other material, though, before you take your break that I want to call to your attention on the front desk is the Rural Attorney Recruitment Program pamphlet announcing the Fred Luella COSAD Challenge. The State Bar of South Dakota has pioneered recruitment of lawyers to rural communities throughout South Dakota. We've achieved success at a level that's captured national attention with regard to the type of program that we have available in South Dakota. There's a financial component to paying for those rural attorneys, to incentivize them to open up shop on Main Street in rural South Dakota. And the COSAD Challenge talks about that incentive and a very, very generous lead gift given by Fred Luella COSAD, 65 plus years in the practice of law in Martin, South Dakota, my hometown, to help us meet that financial challenge. So for our lawyers in the audience, I want to draw to your attention that pamphlet and encourage you to take a strong look at supporting that program, because for every dollar that's contributed between now and February 1st, 2016, Fred Luella will match it. And that match is an important thing that Fred Luella put forward to bring attention to this program, and we want to do everything we can to meet that challenge. So look forward to your review of that material. We're going to come back straight up at 3 o'clock and continue with the program for the remainder of the afternoon, concluding with a panel discussion that was very rewarding when we did it out in Rapids. So thank you very much.